hear me? Is okay, the microphone? So I introduce Igor Berkhin, I'm instructor of second level of Dzamlingar. He's also giving a couple of courses of presence and awareness, both in Buddhist and secular context, being a co-founder of Russian-speaking Mindfulness Teacher Association.
So, good morning, and today our topic is mind, and also we are going to learn something about meditation. And usually when we are talking about anything, and including meditation, we immediately have an idea that we need to do something, but in real sense it's not about doing something, but it's rather about not doing anything. And also that's why many practitioners, in Tibet, for example, they were calling themselves busuku, because it means that someone who is doing nothing, not doing really anything. But first of all, I would like you to sit comfortably. Yeah, okay, and I saw someone was moving, and if you were moving after you were asked to sit comfortably, it means that you were sitting not comfortably. And the question is, why do you need an invitation to sit comfortably? Why you don't sit comfortably yourself? Yeah? So the reason is that we don't really know if we feel comfortable or not. But then also we hear some command that makes us do something. Yeah. Even we were sitting comfortably, but maybe I ask you to sit comfortably and you start to move and it becomes not so comfortable. But what's the reason? The reason is that we are not very much aware of how we are sitting and how we feel. So first of all, I would like to ask you to see, to take a look and understand in which position you are sitting, in which position your body is. So you don't need to move, you don't need to change your position, but just check how is the position of your body. And also you can check if it is balanced, for example. Balance means that we don't need much effort. Because if we are not balanced, that we are working, we are doing something. We need some effort from our body, and sometimes this effort is not really conscious to maintain our body in a vertical position. So, first, we immediately start with some practice. First of all, try to find a balanced position of your body. And for really finding balanced position, we don't need to lean over the chair, over the back of the chair, but find a balance. And also, the head should be balanced in relation to the body. And put your legs in a way that they are not participating, the muscles of your leg are not participating in maintaining your body vertical. They should be also relaxed. And don't hold your body with your arms. So just find a position that maintains itself. Maybe some of you can complain that your body is not really straight, is a little bit curved. But if we study a little bit physics, even school physics, we know that even for the most curved body, the axis of balance is perfectly straight. You cannot twist it, you cannot break it, but we can find it. And how can we find the balanced position of our bodies? For this, we need to move a little bit. We can move forward, try to move forward and notice how the sensations in your body are changing, how the tension is increasing when you're moving forward, when you're leaning forward a little bit. And then slowly you go backwards and observe how you feel. And of course, if you're leaning on the back of the chair, you cannot move backwards. So, and then you notice again how the tension in your body increases. And maybe you move a little bit to the left and to the right, and you observe the sensations in your body. And then you can notice that in a certain position, the tension in your body is minimal. The least tension in your body. So this is more or less balanced position. It's not a point, it's more like a zone. But we can discover this zone, and we discover it not with our body, we discover it with our mind. So try to work a little bit with your body, find a balanced position, and remain in this balanced position. And the same with your head, related to your shoulders, to your torso. When we find balanced position that we don't need much tension, we can release tension and release the burden from our motor cortex in our brain. I know that many spiritual people do not believe in brain, but some knowledgeable people still say it exists and has some importance in our life. So try to find balanced position and just remain in this position. And if you notice that your mind is wandering somewhere, if you notice that, for example, some sound or some sensation in your body or some thought is distracting you, as soon as you notice it, just bring your mind back to where you are and maybe check the position of your body, check if this position is still balanced, if it is still stable, comfortable, relaxed, but also alert at the same time. So let's work like that for a few minutes. Just find balanced position and enjoy it. And if your mind goes away somewhere, as soon as you notice, just bring your mind back. If your mind goes away, just bring it back. Don't try to hold it at one place, but if it goes away, just bring it back. If you notice you are distracted by something, just bring your mind back and check the position of your body. If you notice that something is constantly distracting you, don't fight with it and just place your attention at the very factor that is distracting you. Okay, so we always work with circumstances in our situation, and we continue, we don't stop. But I was not expecting to do a meditation class on the construction field. So we use whatever we have. So we use the sound. So we change the program a little bit. And instead of just trying to bring your attention back to where you are, just remain in the dimension of sound, listening to all possible sounds that exist. But if you notice that you start thinking about those sounds, this is a distraction, and bring your awareness back to sounds, to hearing. If you notice that you are distracted by some sensation in your body, bring your awareness back to hearing. So just remain in this dimension of sound. If you start thinking about this, as soon as you notice you are thinking, bring your awareness back to sounds, to hearing. If you're noticing that your mind is going somewhere, bring it back to hearing. If you start thinking about something, as soon as you notice, bring your awareness back to hearing. As soon as you notice you're thinking, return to hearing. Okay, now just continue without trying to do anything. Just remain in your state as it is, not trying to change anything, not pursuing any goal, any task, but do not start anything new. Okay, now you can relax. Good. So, when first in the beginning we were just trying to maintain balance and not allow our minds to engage into something, could you really manage to do this? Or you were distracted by the sound of construction? Could you, or you were distracted? Okay, sometimes, yeah. But then, when we were listening to the sound, could you always listen to the sound without going into thinking? Yeah. it looks that this sound is so strong and is distracting us from our mental activity. But when we are trying to follow it and just remain in the sound, then immediately we start to think about something and get distracted now from the sound. And it shows our capacity to govern our minds, to govern our attention. And it is limited. And do we immediately recognize when we are distracted? Did you immediately recognize that you were distracted, or it took some time to understand, oh, now my mind is wandering somewhere? Or maybe now my mind is totally into the sound after some time. So we do not immediately recognize, and it means that at this moment, before we recognize where our attention is, we don't really know where our mind is. But at some moment we recognize, and when we recognize, this is the moment of awareness. So this is an example what this famous awareness is. When we recognize where our mind is, this is awareness. But also when we recognize if our body is balanced or not balanced, it is also awareness. When we recognize how our attention is moving, this is awareness. So we know what's going on. When we decide something and we know we decided it, this is awareness. We know what's going on. We have some kind of understanding, recognition. And actually, the way to increase these moments of recognition is to set up a kind of mood in the beginning. I want to recognize my distractions. I want to really recognize when my mind is moving as soon as it starts moving. So if you have this kind of intention in the beginning, it can increase the probability. It does not guarantee anything, but it does increase probability that we will faster recognize our distraction, faster recognize where our attention is at the moment. But that's okay. We don't have condition here to really train this, but it's not the main point of our meeting today. But for example, when we hear the sound, through what do we hear the sound? Using what we hear sounds? We have ears, yeah? Ears, well, just some orifices in our head. So we can hear sound through these orifices, not by ears. Ears are just pieces of meat, pieces of flesh. Also, when we see forms, when we look around and we see beautiful and ugly forms, we see through our eyes. And then we have various sensations in our bodies. Maybe we have pain in the back, or pain in the knee, or maybe we have some nice pleasant sensation of a breeze touching our face. And how we recognize it? Through what we recognize it? We have skin, for example. We have tactile feeling. We have our body as an instrument, as a gate for receiving this information. Like, for example, when we touch a chair on which we are sitting, or we touch something else, we touch some clothes, we touch our body, maybe you can touch your hair. We recognize all these sensations, we recognize through our tactile feeling, through the capacity of our body as a sense organ. And this is something concrete. But how do we recognize we have thoughts? Through what do we recognize that we have thoughts? Can we show it? We recognize we have thoughts, yeah. I mean, it's just behaviorist psychologists, they don't believe thoughts exist. Because we cannot show thoughts to someone else. But we know we have thoughts. With what do we notice those thoughts? Try to notice with what you notice thoughts. We call it mind. In Buddhist phenomenology, we have a specific word for that because it has a very developed terminology to describe different functions that we have, but we still call it mind. Mind as an organ of senses. With what we recognize we have thoughts? Not with our body, not with our eyes, not with our ears, not with our nose, not with our tongue. But we recognize we have thoughts with something. That something with what we recognize our thoughts is mind. And sometimes we can have emotions. For example, when we were doing practice and I have to lead this practice, but then I discover I'm at the construction field, and at the first moment I feel angry. And maybe also some of you could feel some irritation because there are some disturbances, etc. But with what we recognize that we are angry? Through which instrument we notice how we detect that we are angry. And then maybe we have an intention to do something, to experience something. We intend that we bring our minds back. With what we recognize our intentions? With what we recognize all these events that take place in our condition? And then maybe you could notice at some moments that you were totally distracted and started a kind of daydreaming. So instead of being here in this hall, we are somewhere at another place completely. Maybe you did not experience it now, but I can give you a more or less perfect example when we all experienced that. So everyone was probably studying at a university and preparing for examinations. Yeah? And sometimes we have to prepare for examination, which is not very interesting, the subject that we do not really like and feel no interest. But we still have to prepare. And maybe some of you had this experience very recently, even with the subject that you are interested in. Preparing for the examination that we had a few days ago. So, we read a book. And when we read a book, if someone is asking us, what are you doing at the moment? We say, I'm reading a book. We are quite sure we are reading a book. But then when we have to turn the page, then we suddenly recognize that whatever was written on this page that we have just read, we don't remember anything. Do you all have this experience? Yes. Yeah, for sure. Everyone has this experience. Okay, and we are lucky if you recognize it from the first page, yeah, not from the page number 9, yeah? reading, yeah. And we are quite sure, we are quite confident that at this moment we are reading, but why nothing remains? Maybe we read again this page, and again we don't remember anything. But then maybe at some moment, before turning the page for the next time, you recognize that in real sense, our mind was somewhere at the seashore, for example, or at the date, or maybe at a lawyer where we were divorcing with our partner. Yeah? So our mind was somewhere, and that's why when our eyes were performing mechanical activity of following lines, this is a kind of automated activity, our mind was somewhere else. Our mind was in some vision. Yeah. This is one of the most famous obstacles for doing meditation. But what does interest us at the moment is with what we recognize that we are daydreaming. Because at a certain moment we recognize we are daydreaming. So this factor of recognition we can still call awareness, but the organ that is maintaining this function is mind. So it's a kind of virtual organ. We cannot really see it, we cannot describe its shape, like a shape of an ear, or shape of nose, or shape of a tongue. We cannot describe its shape. And the reason we cannot describe its shape is that it's not unfolded in space. This organ, this capacity, we don't really say organ. In Buddhist phenomenology, and many kinds of meditation that are spread around the world now are coming from Buddhism actually. Not every, but many. In Buddhist phenomenology, which was developed for describing mental events, cognitive functions, etc., we call that rather capacities than organs. Organ is something physical, but capacity is not physical. So mental capacity is unfolding not in space, it is unfolding in time. It is also connected to our previous experience. And how do we return, for example, how do we return to sound? Or how do we return to the state of balance? We return because we remember. As soon as we remember the sound, our mind returns to sound. As soon as we remember, balance, our mind returns to balance. This function we call presence, but originally it's something like recollection or remembering. So this is one of the most important mental functions that we have, to recollect. And this recollection brings our attention voluntarily from one place to another. And this is the way to also maintain awareness, to maintain different mental factors in our condition, not just awareness. So, try to notice how you notice. With what you notice thoughts, with what you notice your distractions, but now it's not really distractions, it's just objects to study. We usually call thoughts distractions, but it's not necessary. They are just events. And we develop awareness to these events, for example. Okay, now let's try to do this again. And find a balanced position of your bodies. Then your body does not distract you too much. And as soon as you notice that your mind is wandering somewhere, as soon as you notice you are thinking about something or you are daydreaming, you bring your mind back to where you are. As soon as you notice your mind goes away, just bring it back. If your mind goes away, just bring it back. If you notice it's getting distracted by the sound, just bring it back. Now just remain as you are without following any task. Just remain in your condition as it is, not changing anything, not trying to do something new or something old. Okay. When we work with our visual capacity, visual faculty, and how we recognize what is space. Space is not a kind of object that we can really see, but we all understand what is space. Maybe some animals do not understand what space is, but humans more or less understand. Can you remember how you were taught to understand what space is? Difficult to remember, yeah? But somehow we know. But how do we know space?
Distance.
Yeah. We have objects. And we notice some distance between ourselves and the object. Like, for example, this cup. There is a distance between this cup and myself. I feel this distance. I don't want to go into ontological discussion and to discuss whether there is really the distance or not. From some point of view, there is no distance, but we feel there is a distance. There is a distance between myself and this object. And then there is another object, and again, I notice the distance. I look around and I notice many, many objects, and with each of these objects, I have some kind of distance. And then if I'm trying to be present to all possible visual objects that I see, and all possible distances that are between myself and all these objects, then I discover what space is. So the space is just accumulation of all distances between myself and objects. If we make a mental experiment and we imagine ourselves in outer space without any object, can we really know what space is if there were no objects? No way. So space and objects are interdependent. There cannot be space, recognition of space, without objects. But there cannot be recognition of objects also without space. For example, if you bring an object close to your eyes, immediately close to your eyes, we will never recognize there is an object there. So this is space, but this is a visual space. But then we can turn to the sound. We are not that well trained as well as to recognize forms, to recognize sounds, unless we work with sound professionally like musicians or sound engineer, etc. But we can also recognize there is a distance between ourselves and sound. There is distance, there is direction. So then we can discover, if we observed different sounds, we can discover the dimension of sound and technically, for example, sound engineers call this soundscape. It's like a landscape but in sound. It's a dimension of sound with all objects, auditory objects that manifest in this dimension. So maybe when we start to try to recognize this dimension, maybe it's not that easy if you were not trained in sounds. But after some time, after some training, we can start recognition. We can start recognizing this dimension, this soundscape. But then what about our minds? When you notice a thought, for example, when you notice some emotion, when you notice some intention that manifests in your dimension, in your body, mind, psychosomatic organism, do you notice as an object or not? Do you notice some distance between yourself and the thought? Yeah. Like particularly when we are turning the page of a book which is not interesting to us, we notice a thought about being at the seashore, and it's like a tale of a train that we missed. Yeah? So we can notice it with the distance. Then there is some intention. For example, try to hear, to understand very well what I'm going to say. Do you notice your intention to do this? Do you notice? Yeah. How do you notice it? Yeah. You feel some kind of distance between yourself who is noticing this and this intention. So, in this way, when we slowly develop our capacity to be just present to whatever mental events that manifest, that appear, we can develop the feeling, the perception of a space where all these events and distances take place. The dimension of mental events, we can call it the dimension of mind, which is like space. This is not visual space, this is not soundscape, a kind of mental scape, psychoscape. So, instead of being conditioned totally by a single object, like for example, when there is some construction work and some machine is working, like for example, mixing concrete, that for some moment all our attention is conditioned, totally captured by this object. And at this moment, maybe we do not perceive the soundscape, the totality of sound. In the same way, we can be conditioned by a thought, by emotion, by kind of intention that manifests in our condition. But if you release a little bit this tension, we can start to slowly notice not just objects, but also the space, empty space, where all these mental events occur, manifest. So let's try to remain a little bit in whatever position that you like, whatever position that you feel comfortable. Position should not become an obstacle, but just sit comfortably and try to observe, notice through all events, through all mental events that occur and that you notice, the dimension where they take place. And when you notice you start thinking about something, just return maybe to some support, maybe to your body or to the sound, whatever. And then release your grasping at this support and just maintain recognition of mental events and space, and with their space. Okay, and we just maintain this presence while listening. And even though we have to shift our awareness to the sound to listen to the words, but with what you understand the meaning of these words, where this meaning unfolds. Still in the same space, in the mental space. And we notice, for example, oh, I understand or I don't understand. This is not a thought. You recognize you understand or not. Then there is a thought that describes these events. And we can recognize this is just another thought. We don't really need to recognize this thought as a description of something, but just as another thought. And then again, I'm going to ask you a question related to our visual perception. Because our visual perception and sphere of our visual perception is the most close metaphor to mental perception. It's not the same, but it serves as a metaphor, because when we enter some new field of knowledge, we are using terms from something that we already know as a metaphor. And for cognitive functions, we use metaphors. We say, do you see? But we don't really mean that we see, we mean understanding. And we say, I have to digest this information. And this is a metaphor, this is a somatic metaphor for cognitive process of understanding. We say, I want to raise a question. And this is a spacious metaphor for some cognitive event. So we are using metaphors from our visionary perception, from our somatic processes, etc., to explain, to describe something that takes place in mind. So space is another metaphor. It's not really space, but it's a metaphor. Space is a metaphor. So, when we see objects through our eyes, what, besides space, besides distance, what is necessary to really see objects? What is the indispensable prerequisite for seeing objects? What? But this is an object. This is exactly what we need to see. Who said light? Yeah. We need light. To see shapes and colors, which are characteristics of an object, we need light. So not just space, but also light. It doesn't really matter which kind of source of light we are using, but we need light. Maybe there is no direct source of light. There can be dissipated light. But there should be some light to see objects. When there is no light, even though our faculty of perception is perfect, even though we have objects in front of us, but if there is no light, it doesn't work. So we need some kind of luminosity of this space, whether it is artificial luminosity or it is natural luminosity, but we need it in order to see, to notice objects in this space. But then we apply the same metaphor to our minds. Do we always recognize mental events? Sí or no? No. But how do you think? They occur all the time or not? We can suppose that they occur all the time. And I don't mean that we are distracted. In this case, I don't mean that they occur, but we are distracted with something else and we don't recognize. No. I mean the situation more like when they occur, but there is no light. So, for example, when we are fainting, something like this, yeah? So this is a kind of extreme situation when we are fainting and we don't really recognize what's going on. Probably we still have some hormonal processes in our bodies which are usually recognized as emotions. Probably we have some neural processes in our brain that we usually recognize as thoughts. They take place physically, objectively, for other people, not for us. Can be traced with analysis of our blood, analysis of like tomography, neuroimaging, etc. But we are blank. fainting in the darkness. This is extreme situation. And sometimes we recognize thoughts. And sometimes we can recognize thoughts clearly, very clearly. And sometimes it's a little bit murky, like foggy. So you see, there is a like gradation, gradual scale. But the point of this gradual scale is that there is some kind of luminosity in our minds, and as well as we can recognize luminosity of space, whether it is luminous or not, we can also recognize natural luminosity of our minds. Luminosity that allows us to notice thoughts. So let's just remain. And through recognizing mental events, notice not just quality of spaciousness, but as well the quality of luminosity that allows us, better or worse, recognize what the hell is going on in our minds, or what the paradise is going on there. Not necessarily hell. So we can just remain, we can train for that. This is not an easy task, but it is possible to train to remain in this recognition of this empty luminous space, regardless objects that appear and disappear in this space, arise and cease. A thought is arising and ceasing. An emotion is arising and ceasing. The sounds are arising and ceasing. But we just remain in recognition, in awareness of these spacious and luminous qualities of our minds. And as soon as something is arising and catching our attention, and we become conditioned and we lose the perception of this spaciousness and luminosity, it's important that we immediately recognize that and release this grasping. And when we fall into some daydreaming vision, that we immediately recognize that this is just daydreaming and it disappears. And another important thing is to maintain continuity of this recognition with presence, with a kind of recollection to maintain continuity. And then, if we can train like this, maybe we get some interesting result. We don't need advertising what kind of result it is. It can be just interesting. If you remain in this recognition, what was going to happen? But then there can be another question. there are thoughts. And usually we say that mind is producing thoughts. And there is also recognition, noticing these thoughts. So the mind which is producing thoughts and the mind which is recognizing these thoughts, is it the same entity or not? But that's going to be your homework. So for the moment, for concluding our session, you just summarize for yourselves. You summarize what you have learned, if you have learned anything. What you have discovered, if you discovered anything. Maybe you developed a little bit, just a little bit of some skill, but you summarize it. And on the base of whatever good happened during these 1 hour and 15 minutes, you just notice if you are satisfied with what had happened. If you enjoyed that, if you are satisfied with something, not just because you enjoyed, but maybe because it was something useful. But it's so easy to lose it. As soon as we raise from the seat and we go to the toilet, then whatever we learned, whatever we accumulated, maybe remains here in this hall, but doesn't go with us to the toilet. Yeah. So, for this we need a kind of intention. On the base of being satisfied with what we accumulated, we make a wish that whatever we accumulated is not going to dissipate, is not going to be lost, but remains, matures, and brings beneficial results, beneficial effects, consequences, both for ourselves and for other beings. So with this, a kind of benediction, mental benediction, benevolence, with this intention, we conclude our session. Okay, thank you.